Hey, it's Jeremy from Jeremy.net. I am a comic book artist, writer, creator, self-publisher, and I share my creative process with you here online. If you'd like to get additional bonus live streams twice a month, be able to read my comic books for free online, see more behind the scenes into my creative process, you can become a Patreon subscriber for as little as $2 a month. Head over to patreon.com/Jeremy. That's patreon.com/GERIMI. If you would like to receive a free digital sketchbook, get work in progress animated GIFs delivered right to your inbox, blog posts talking about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, what's fuel is going into my creative tank, you sign up for my monthly newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my comics, or if you read digitally on Kindle Comixology, you can head on over to amazon.jeremy.net. They'll forward you to my Amazon author page. You can pick up books like my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods. It is a psychological thriller about a man cursed with visions he cannot control. You can also pick up my most recent comic book, Morning Star. Morning Star is a 2-volume series. It tells the story of Lucifer's fall from heaven as a Western. This book contains issues 1 through 4. Volume 2 contains issues 5 through 8, the conclusion of the series. Both of them have extensive back matter. They've got character sketches, character designs, page layouts, script excerpts, and more. You can get all of those at amazon.jeremy.net. And speaking of which, this week for the Patreon subscribers, this coming week is our art book study group where we dive into some of the best art books around and try to suck all the knowledge out of it we can. We've been doing an ongoing series on Walt Reed's The Figure, and that'll be this Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So, and those live streams usually run about 3 hours. So like I said, if you're not a subscriber and you want to get in on that, head over to patreon.com/Jeremy and become a subscriber. And if you miss it, all of the older episodes are archived, so you can go through on Patreon and just check under the tag Art Book Study Group, and you can see, hours, hundreds of hours at this point of live streams of analyzing art books. We've done a ton on Walt Reed's The Figure. We have a few videos we've done on George Bridgman, some with Ken Holtgren and his animal drawings. So all of that and more. There's links to all of these, the Patreon, the newsletter, the Amazon. They're all in the description for the video. So just scroll down to the description and click on that and head on over. All right. I see the chat is hot already. Hang on. Let me bring up the... Oh, wait. Here we go. There we go. Let's see. Well, actually, hang on. Let me put this down for a second because I have to turn off the screen auto lock so I can keep this open if I start jawing for a long time and forget to draw. Let's see here. Iron Rocks says, I just saw the Mobius piece you did. Yeah, it's funny. We've been talking we've been texting, and he had asked about me doing like a total request type thing, taking requests. I was going to tell you, well, I already did that once with the Mobius thing, and I think people might have enjoyed watching it. I don't know how much fun I had doing it because it was really hard and it didn't come out well. So I don't think I'm going to be doing a request style live stream anytime soon. I'm not saying I'm never going to do it again, but I did try it once, and I don't think that the live stream was a fail. I just think that the results were not. I mean, when you're trying to do Mobius, it's like, come on. You'd have to be like, you have to be another genius level artist to do something that's going to be interesting enough for someone to say, wow, that's a great interpretation of a Mobius piece. So, but I'm glad you liked it. Let's see. Negro Frazetta says, did you move? The background's new. I know I am still in the same location. However, I've tried getting the green screen function on StreamYard to work so I could have my artwork as my background. And for some reason, I don't know if it's because my laptop isn't powerful enough. I don't know if it's a memory problem. I don't know if it's me not using the right browser or whether I need to run the whole thing through OBS. But just the straightforward green screen does not work. And I even got like a screen background to put behind my chair, and it didn't work. So I thought, instead of just seeing all the clutter of my studio, I just got a really nice Japanese screen to put behind me, and I'm pretty happy with it. It's attractive, and then I have a little camera behind me that kind of projects like just a little star field that's projected behind me. So that's my hand covering the projector. So that's kind of like just a nice little background to just spruce it up, spruce it up. Let's see here. Byron finally managed to catch the stream live this week. Thanks for rolling in, man. It's always good to see you. Always good to have you here. See, Elon's in the chat. What's going on, man? Things are good with me. I'm just sort of chugging along. And Rock says he can't sign in on the computer, so he'll be watching from the phone. Negro Frazetta says I should be at Art Book Study Group if I don't fall asleep. Well, man, you're on the East Coast. I'm doing it West Coast time. So sleep is always more important. Here's the thing. You can always watch the replays of the Art Book Study Group and leave comments if you have questions on stuff I do on Patreon or on the Discord, and I'll still come back in and re-answer those. I can always come in, and in the following Art Book Study Group, I can do stuff where we can address any issues that you have questions about from our previous video. Let's see here, Ebony Brown's in the chat. Thanks for rolling through, Ebony. Good to see you. Thank you for joining. Let's see here, Ru Wa is in the chat. All right, people are in. Looks like we got a full house here. All right, thanks so much. All right, so here we are with the Medusa piece, the piece that would not die. Now, the only changes I've really made since last time is I kind of went in, added the glowing eyes, and I adjusted the values on the serpents, because the final votes, the tallies, were that people want the green and the red. But what I found was I dropped a black and white layer on top of this, and the values I had for the green were a little too dark. Now, to me, I'm happy with what this is now. I came in and adjusted the lightness, the brightness, and the saturation a little bit more on the serpents, because again, this is one of those things where I find when I'm working on a piece for a long time, I sometimes, or if I've just been doing a lot of pieces, I will often forget Art 101 basics, things that I know I should do. And as soon as somebody says, "Hey, man, why don't you put it in a black and white mode so you can check your values?" That's a duh. Anytime you're working on a piece and you're getting ready to go, before you start laying colors down, real quick, just convert it to grayscale or put a grayscale filter on it, and just check those values. See if they work. The values of Medusa's skin tone and the serpents were too close together, so I just bumped it up a little bit, so it had a little bit more. I made it really a little bit darker and more saturated, because it was too light and too gray, and it gave this a tone that was too similar to her skin tone. So now I'm pretty happy with this, and I was like, okay, I can continue. So let's see here. Elon says it's looking great. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. So I could go in here and start painting scales, because it would be very satisfying, because it's just working on trying to wrap a light around the volumes. But I feel like the bigger challenge is working on the skin tones, the highlights now, defining the form a little bit more. But the nice thing about that is I've kind of done a little bit of that work already. Let's see here. Let's rename this skin tones. Actually, I'll name this tones, and I'm going to change the other tones to line work. There's a line here originally that I named tone, but that was all just ended up being the line art. I thought I was going to just start painting right on there. It's so weird. I've just in this piece, I think part of the struggles is that I haven't stuck to a very basic workflow. Um, for doing, I don't think I've really perfected my work. That's a big, interesting point. I really don't think I've perfected my workflow for doing colored pieces in Procreate. Um, and having a workflow allows you to, when you come up with problems or there's, when a piece doesn't look right, you know that, okay, well, as soon as I get to the next stage, I'll understand where it's going. Making sure that your values are right, making sure you've flipped it and checked the anatomy and the volume, making sure you've run through and looked at some reference, maybe doing different color studies. All of those things are things that help you so you don't ever feel lost. You just know that at certain stages it's going to be ugly, things aren't going to be going as well. And then some stages you're like, oh my God, it's all coming together. It looks so dope. And I don't think I've really built my my workflow. So hang on, first off, I'm going to lock the line art because just now I saw that I almost started drawing on that layer and I really don't want to draw on the line art layer. Although here's another thing. I do this in my my day job a lot of times. I see Amar rolled in and Jay King's here. How you guys doing? Thanks for rolling in. Good to see you. Hope your weekend is going well. Hope you had a chance to do something creative this weekend. In fact, yeah, if you guys feel sharing in the chat, if you've had time to do any creative work this week and how that went for you, how it's been going. So what I was going to say is a habit that I do in my day job is when I get to a certain point with a file that not necessarily a point of no return, but a point when I'm going to start making some changes. And I know that if I wanted to go back, it would be really hard. It's almost like I create a save. It's exactly what I do. I'm creating a save point for myself. So what I'll do is like, there's another, now that's the old sketch. So this is basically where the piece was before. And hell, no, I don't have the black and white layer on there. But what I did was I changed the name, and I can't go in large and show you. I can't zoom into the actual name on the screen here, but I have the exact same file name, but I put the date before it. So the point is that this piece is always called Gorgon Shadow. And then the save point, I'll create a duplicate of it, and I'll name it Gorgon Shadow February. Okay, February, today's the 20th, February 20, 2022. So I'll just name the save point, the date plus the file name. So that way my file, it's not like I'm going version 1, version 2, version 3, version 4. The working file, the latest file is always the same name. It's the older files that have the dates to them. And that seems like a really good system for me because for anybody who ever does graphic design, I'm sure you've seen where you've got version, then you get to a certain point where you call that version final. And if you're working for someone else as opposed to freelancing, well, even if you're a freelancer and you're working outside of house, when you add the words final to a file, we all know it's a lie. Because there's always changes, there's always revisions, there's always something that comes up afterwards. There's something where a project's been done for like a year and somebody comes back and says, hey, can you tweak this one thing or change this one thing in the file? So the idea of adding the words final to any file feels like a lie to me. So I try to avoid doing that because really it's just that it irritates me to have a file that is named final and then have to change things to it. And I know that's going to have to happen. So I try to avoid naming things final. The file name is just the file name. So I'm trying to find a brush size that'll be about right for me. And I probably should go in here with a soft airbrush. So we'll see. I may come back and change my what am I trying to think of? Change from the soft brush that I'm doing. The hard brush that I'm doing, I may switch to an airbrush. But right now, let me see. First off, let me find my selection here. Nope. Here we go. So what I'm going to do is start painting in some reflected light with a very low opacity. Okay, that is too small. I need a brush that's a little bit larger. Now, ordinarily, I think most people, logic would dictate that you use a soft brush for doing this kind of lighting. The way I like to work is just using a regular brush on a low opacity and kind of building up values. And who knows, I might be wasting time by doing this instead of just coming in with an airbrush, but it feels like I don't have as much control with an airbrush as I do with a regular brush. Because with an airbrush, I can come in basically, for instance, let me zoom in here. Basically, I can come in and do a shadow here and do it like basically like I'm doing hatching. Except it's not really hatching. It's just, if you do it with a soft enough tone, in fact, I didn't really do a great job of it. More often than not, I wouldn't do it like that. I probably actually would just kind of come in here and fill it all the way in like that. Is this layer on top of the line art? It is. But when you zoom out, those light tones all kind of stick together. And I think the big challenge for me is going to be finding the right amount of light to put in here. Because I do want to keep her in shadow. So it's really kind of like a little bit of a balancing game. Let's see here. Elon's got a bounce. Says can't wait to get my print. Oh no, he just have to run. When you said print run, I thought you said you were gonna run. He said can't wait to get my print run study time. Oh yeah, he does have to run. See you in the next stream. All right, good to see you, man. Have a good time. Take it easy. So I did read it right the first time. All right. Byron says a great quote. No work of art is ever finished, only abandoned. Leonardo da Vinci. Very, very true. Very, very true. Nothing. Yeah, you always. I mean, I have tons of pieces. Every time I look at a quote unquote finished piece, I have to fight to not want to go in and say, let me change the colors on this. Let me tweak this. I mean, you know what? That perspective is off there. I mean, everything I look at, I can see mistakes. And want to go back and tweak and change and modify. And it takes all of my strength. So I shouldn't make it all sound like clients will make me go back and change things. Oftentimes, it's not the client, it's me. Says the guy who is already thinking about redoing the cover to his most recent graphic novel. And what's weird is I would have to go back and look at my digital sketchbook or my notes because I don't even remember what I was thinking about doing for that revised version. I'm sure I had something very specific in mind, but as time has gone on, I have forgotten. Let's see here. Amar says, I did graphic design in the 90s to 2010s, including teaching visual communication for 6 years. That did software development. They said that also applies to certain artworks as well. And he says, I give you this, though. You are far more patient than I am. I tend to run through my pieces kind of fast. I think the longest I spent on a piece recently was a surrealistic Prince piece. Um, well, I mean, this piece could be finished much quicker. Uh, for me, it's more of I keep working on it unless I have a deadline. I keep working on a piece until I'm satisfied with it. So, you know, it's not necessarily, oh, my patience is a virtue. It's that I know it's going to drive me nuts to have a piece that has flaws in it that I could have fixed but didn't. So if I see something and I know it can be improved, and again, perfectionism is an ongoing conversation we've had multiple times and we've talked it to death. But I don't see it as perfectionism to fix a problem that I know I can fix. Perfectionism is sitting there and being upset that no matter what I do, a piece doesn't look good. There's a certain point at which I will look at a piece and I know it's not great, but I've done everything I can do. At which point I say, all right, this piece is done. It goes back to the Da Vinci quote. It's not finished, it's abandoned. When I've done everything I can do and the piece just is not going to get better, then it's done. I have to let it go. For me, I see like with this whole piece, there were a lot of problems with the values and I wasn't happy with it. Um, there were problems with the line work and the early composition that I kept kind of futzing around. Like I was, yeah, a lot of it. I wasn't even happy with the composition of the piece early on. So I drew a ton of extra different versions of it. So I mean, I see what you say about not wanting to spend a lot of time on a piece, but for me, it's about personal satisfaction, and I figure a person should spend as much time on a piece as they spend to get the results they want. For me, I'm always trying to level up and take my stuff to, I'm trying to do things that I haven't been able to do before in art. But I certainly don't think there's anything wrong. Let me put it this way: I would prefer to be able to do pieces very, very quickly and knock them out. But the problem with that is when I do, I'm not satisfied with them. And if I'm not doing artwork for personal satisfaction, then it's like, why do it? So instead of trying to paint the tones in here exactly the way I want, I'm finally going to give in and start using the smudge tool more. And I'm thinking I may actually even kick the opacity down on the line art a little bit more. So I really have to come in here and start taking this painting seriously. And by painting seriously, I mean the actual application of digital paint. Because as somebody who mostly focuses on line art, it's real easy to just let the line art, to color a piece as opposed to painting it. I mean, both are still very much building volumes with light. Let's see here. Yeah, Amar mentioned the Prince piece was working, and that took 8 to 12 hours, and that may be overstating it. Generally, 3 to 6 hours is what I would do for portrait work. And he says, yeah, I see. He says, I see flaws in the piece where I do know it can be better, but don't want to spend the time. Like I hear people say they spent a week, a month, or when it gets past 20 to to 1,000 hours. Like I said, people say they spend 1,000 to 10,000 hours on a piece. And he said, like with the owls, I've spent maybe 2 or 6 at most on one owl. Well, again, time is relative. All that matters is that you're satisfied with the final piece. I I only put in as much work as required for me to be satisfied. So, but like Prince, sometimes I'm just like my mother. She's never satisfied. All right, let's kick the when it's locked, it doesn't even let me adjust the opacity. So let's bring the line art down. See what happens if I bring it down to about 50%. 30%. No, all right. But I want us to put it just right above the level where I really start losing the line art. And it's like I'm fighting to get it back with the color. Let's just try 50% for now. So Amar says, if I spend more time, it seems like I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it to show people how good I am. And then it gets into ego. Um, well, I honestly think, I think that that's a fair point. But if I were doing this for me and for no one else, let me this way: if I was never going to show anybody this piece, I would still want it to look good because, again, if let me this way: if you're only doing something for yourself, then why do anything more than just a sketch? So, and to be honest, if that's what the pieces are, if the pieces end up being more like just digital sketches as opposed to finished paintings or illustrations, it's like hell, go for it. Um, that's a little too much for me. This type of rendering is the thing that I'm doing for myself. Fact of the matter is I probably could finish this a lot quicker by just trying to simplify. And who's to say I won't get simpler with my art as time goes on? Like one of the things I'm thinking about is restricting myself to doing mostly black and white pieces. And color is extremely powerful, but I work in black and white so much quicker. And I'm so used to working in black and white for my comics. Just a little bit of light on her forehead, not a lot. Erase tool instead of the smudge tool. And maybe give her a tiny little bit of this on the tip of her bottom of her earlobe. See here. Byron says, that's me a lot of the time. I sure do love me some sketching. This is an interesting thought. In terms of making stuff for me and not for other people, I have also considered the idea not just of doing it in black and white, but pardon me, I just need to stretch my shoulders a little bit. But maybe trying to intentionally do pieces that are trying to make them look as close to my rough sketch as possible to try and have the finished piece have that energy that the rough sketch has, to have it feel raw and loose, maybe raw and loose with a splash of color, or doing it in black and white but just rendering out only enough that it has a little bit more finish to it, or more like a sketch that clarifies the things that are kind of amorphous and dreamlike that aren't solidified, just solidifying the things that I want that are vague details, and then leaving it at that. These are all things that I just need to spend time practicing. Yeah, I think I am going to switch to the airbrush now because I feel like I'm making lines and then I'm coming in with the smudge tool and just fixing, just softening hard lines. It feels like it's doing double duty. Oop, don't want to erase that. I want to smudge it. Let's see here. Soft brush. Well, as long as I'm at this, I might as well come in and start doing the shadows so I can get a nice contrast. Or rather reflected light. That's what I mean. I mean, in this case, you're getting what I would call reflected light kind of shining up at her the underside of her skin. But what I mean is the cool light in contrast to the warm light. First, let me get this light here under the. Whoop! That brush is way too big. Let's bring this down a little bit. That opacity is way too high. Let's bring that down. Yeah, I'm just going real light in here, trying to get subtle strokes. What's funny is now, as I look at it, I feel like I do need a harder brush. I need to come in there and solidify some of the features on her face. You know what? I'm going to come in and work the values on the rest of the body first and then come in and do those features. But I am curious what this will look like if I let a little bit of this light, the warm light, bleed over outside of the shadows here. Now, let me see. Do I have a layer that's just her body without the serpents? I don't. But I can make a selection that does that. See, this is the one thing that sucks, is that's kind of a pain in the ass to create selections in Procreate, in that I can take this layer I have that I call skin. I can duplicate this, fill it with black, which actually looks pretty dope. Um, to be revisited. Then I can come in here and select just the serpents. I have to use 2 fingers here. And then delete. And now I have a layer that is just her actual skin. So the layer that I was calling skin before has like her body and the serpents. And the only point of me doing this is that now I can use this layer. I could just create a clipping mask, but instead what I'm going to do is I am going to now select this layer and I'm going to save it in my selections. So now I can get rid of this, because again, when you're working on a large size Procreate file, it limits the number of layers. I think I probably only have 16 layers to work with. So this is back to like the days of early Photoshop, when you really, I think it was like early on, you were restricted to like maybe 20 layers. And then when you were able to have like 50 layers, it was like, oh my God, the luxury. So Procreate, I guess, is back to that era now, in terms of like being limited in your capacity. Let's see here. John Ursick popped into the chat. Good to see you, John. Thank you. This is looking sharp. Let's see here. Scroll back up. We were talking more about finishing pieces, and Amar says, so you can see certain pieces, it will be like, oh yeah, I've grown, or I didn't think I could do that. This is also, I didn't have the same energy to do what I did 30 or 20 years ago. I do desire to do hyper-real or 3D rendered work or in 2D for certain issues as a collector's item one day. So, but those are bucket list items. Well, I mean, I've seen comics that are all done with 3D rendered characters. And the fact of the matter is that if you spend all of your time modeling your characters up front, when you're actually making the comic, you can just come in and just pose them. You know, then it's just, you know, a lot simpler. So I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with just coming in and imposing your characters that way. You're doing hyper real work in that manner. Not that I am the arbiter of what is good or bad or right or wrong in anyone else's art. And what's funny is, when I was younger, I was more of the mindset of get the piece out, get it done, and just try to make it look. The idea that I had when I was younger was try to make it look cool, not make it look complete. So when I talk about things that I can do now that I couldn't do back then, I was much more of a person who would rush through pieces. And I think I've really evolved into wanting a piece to be more meditative. Whoops, that's too much. Meditative, more thoughtful, to work slower in finishing a piece. Yeah, so I'm just coming in here like that whole idea of when you do like when you draw a rendered ball and you've got your your highlight, your local color, you know, your highlight, your light area, your local color, your half tone, and you've got that terminator and your then your core shadow, and then that reflected light. This is just me painting, treating the figure like she is one of those spheres, and I'm using this purple color, which really complements the overall scheme. It's a purplish blue. The idea is to use this in kind of a twofold. So I'm using it both to render reflected light, but also to model in shadow, like to model in anatomy and the fact that I can put a little bit more reflected light. That's probably too much right there. So it's not just modeling spheres, but giving you that sense of the serratus muscles, like I'm painting right now. As I'm trying to use reflected light to paint anatomy. We'll see how that goes. Because the other thing that I struggle with is putting too much detail in the shadows. Because the shadows shouldn't have a lot of detail because they're shadows. And mind you, any artist can come in and say, oh yeah, and then they will come in and do a dope ass piece that has tons of detail in the shadows and the highlights are blown out. You know, if your goal is to prove that rule wrong, you can. Anyone could come up with a scenario where the shadow area is going to be the area that has all of the detail, and they're going to find a way to make the shadows really really work, to have all the detail in the shadow and not the highlight. But as a general rule, I aim for, and also I think that the color that I'm using right here is too saturated. I am going to come in and let's mute this. And by mute, I mean desaturate. I don't mean mute like the mute button. Something grayer. Even this, I mean, the fact of the matter is, if I were going for naturalistic painting, even this is probably far too saturated for a shadow. That's another thing to remember. Brightness, saturation should, again, these are general rules, but brightness should really exist. Brightness should really exist in the midtones, in halftones, not in the shadows. So I'm just gonna go in there and erase all that and try it again with this more muted color. Amar says, I've not made any salads in a while, but the salad I made yesterday with garbanzo beans, red onion, broccoli, mixed greens, and a few faux chicken strips turned out really good. Good to hear it. Glad you're eating well. Glad you're eating healthy. My wife and I had Olive Garden last night. Lasagna. It's delicious. Amar says I try to stick to controlled eating so I don't gain weight since I don't exercise. I mean, for me, I'm kind of the opposite where I try to exercise as much as possible so that I can eat whatever I want. And part of that comes from, I mean, we weren't supposed to eat whatever we want, but I was an athlete in college, and our coach definitely, tried to get us to stay away from fatty foods and fried foods. But we worked out so much that we were always hungry and ravenous. So it's like you imagine the appetite of like a kid in their 20s in college, and then imagine that with working out 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. You're just going to be like an eating machine. So nowadays, I just try to eat. I try to work out moderately so I can still eat things like Olive Garden as opposed to just sticking with nothing but salads. Although I definitely appreciate a good salad, so I hear you. Cassiel is in the chat. How you doing, man? Thanks for rolling in. Let's see here. Byron mentions in terms of the layer maximums for procreating. He says, I find I don't really use many layers. I find, it's not necessarily that I use a ton of layers, but it's more like I'll start doing things. It's more like the layers are for experimental things. Like putting in like the red layer, the magenta layer, serpents, trying different lighting effects, playing with different things with the background. That's where I start building up these extra layers. So, and the fact that I know that when I'm done with this, I'm probably going to put another layer on top that has sort of the light. I mean, I could just paint the actual backlight and the light that's raking across her torso. I could just paint those blurrier, but I find it easier to paint them with a hard line and then paint like a glow layer on top where I blur the edges of all of those things. So the extra lines end up being just effects or experimenting with different parts of the piece. Let's see here. Amar says, I think I'll do something with the similar ominous look since I finally figured out his main pose. That's good. It's always nice to try different styles, different feels. Let's see here. What's going on? Yeah, Amar says I was referring to rendering them. Oh, in terms of the detailed rendering, and saying I was referring to rendering them in 2D and not 3D. But that said, Blender, 3D. You could save yourself a lot of drawing, and then you could have super detailed work by just making the models and posing them. So it's something to consider. Let's see here. Cassiel says, last week I was copying Bridgman's constructive anatomy, excerpt the hands. Let's see here. He says, just copying by eyeballing in freehand. Neymar says, we're now on reverse paths, I guess. Well, it's interesting. It's not that I'm trying to be the most detailed artist I am. I think that I'm trying to find what really satisfies me creatively. And I actually, to say that, like the whole conversation about doing stuff over for ego versus oneself, I actually don't think it's a bad thing to want to please your audience. I think it's a good thing. And to be honest, I think that I don't have that as much as I should. Like, this is something my wife and I have talked about, where she's like, if you just did like, Naruto pieces or Yu-Gi-Oh pieces, if you just did like fan art or did a bunch of like sexy Harley Quinns or Catwoman, she's like, you could just draw art all day. You wouldn't need to, do the day job. Just do really cool fan art. I am not anti-fan art. Okay, I think fan art is very cool, but generally speaking, I don't feel compelled to create fan art. Lately, I haven't. This is the crazy thing. The stuff that I want to do fan art of, let me tell you how misguided I am and how detached I am from actual marketing and doing things that are business wise. Now, instead of doing fan art of Boba Fett from Book of Boba Fett, or I don't know, maybe the Naomi show on the CW. Instead of doing art, doing fan art of pop culture and comic stuff, my wife and I have started watching this TV show called Yellow Jackets, which is basically it's Lord of the Flies, with with a high school girl soccer team, except it's got some potentially supernatural elements to it. And so far, I love that show. And I was trying to just do some sketches while we were watching an episode, just to keep my hand loose and keep the drawing practice going. And I thought to myself, huh, what if I were to do a bunch of pieces? Like, at first I tried filling a page with just sketches of heads while the show was on, and I didn't like the way any of them came out. And I thought, what if I just pick a character each episode, and just while we're watching the episode, just kind of work on one little sketch, so I get like 1 hour to sketch that character. And I thought, okay, so instead of doing fan art of like some pop culture sci-fi stuff, I'm doing this I want to do portraits of this magical surrealism, survival horror, drama. So, I mean, and yeah, the show is popular. So it's not like there's no audience for it, but I'm definitely not coming at it from the mindset of what's going to make me the most money. And one could say that maybe that should be exactly what I'm thinking. I should be coming at it from is what's going to make you money. Now let's see what happens if I blow this brush up to, whoa, that's way too much. And just give it a little bit of, almost as if there's a glow off the screen down here at the bottom. There we go. I kind of like that. Bring this down a little bit. On the underside of the abs. Let's see here. Let's see here. Amar says, I think I have digressed in certain areas and progressed in others. He said, because the way I do less fine art, no figure drawing, and barely use traditional materials. You know what? I mean, everyone's got to find their own path. It's not like that's the beauty of art, is that, there's not really a huge ton of, there's not really rules. Everyone just has to figure out what works for them. I feel like I've digressed in recent years only in that I think I was really making a lot of progress when I was working on Morningstar in terms of the number of hours per day I was drawing, and just logging in the man hours was upping my skill level. And I think in the past few months, I have not been putting in as many hours on the drawing board. I need to get back to that thing where I'm not just drawing for 1 hour a day. I need to get back up to like 2 or 3 hours a day. And it doesn't matter whether I'm working on a comic, a print, sketching in front of the TV, but I just need to have more hours in. And again, this is also one of those scenarios where, like I say, this is more for, I want to improve my draftsmanship. It's not about trying to fulfill some sort of regiment, or like, oh, as an artist, you have to put X number of hours in on the drawing board. I just feel like I'm not getting the results that I want from my craft as much as I did when I was putting more hours in. And so my answer is get back to putting more hours in. I'm getting a little bit too crazy with this reflected light here. I need to push it more towards the edge. I have too much of it going on in the interior of the figure. Let's see here. Cassiel says, I've also sketched some people outside of my house. Going and doing some outdoor sketching. I have not been leaving the house much over the course of the pandemic. Not so much because I'm concerned for myself, but more just my wife is immune compromised. So it's like I have to stay away from people, because if I get sick and I get her sick, it's real serious. So Cassiel says, he's had a very productive week. So here, Amar says, everything digital I can do. So my traditional use of tools are way out of practice. Let's see here. Cassiel says, it was a productive week. I'm also drawing some skulls. He says, sorry if I'm talking too much. No, not a problem at all. I like to, if you guys don't notice, I skip around on the chat just depending, because sometimes you guys are having a really interesting conversation in the chat, and I'm like, go ahead, continue. I may not catch all of the nuances, but I kind of like the fact that you guys are all sharing information and having like kind of a side conversation, even if it's not like, if you guys are talking about stuff that isn't directly related to what I'm drawing right now, I'm like, by all means, have fun, chit chat, and interact with each other. I think that that's really cool that can be going on while I'm drawing. So definitely go. And then if sometimes if there's a lot of conversation going on, I can't catch everything, and I'll just read sort of the highlights and mention them in the stream while I'm going. So by all means, chat away, guys. Have fun in there. Yeah, Amar says, I talk all the time in the chat, even when no one is here. Well, the nice thing is when it's just me and Amar, then it's just Amar and I having a conversation. It's just like, yeah, we're chatting. So it's good times. Mm. To your Cassiel says, I did a self-portrait once, a portrait of my grandpa, and I gave it to him. Self-portraits are something that I don't do enough of. They really are great for studying facial features, because what face do you know better than your own? And doing portraits for other people are difficult because people generally don't like the way that they look, and they're always like, oh, if anything is off, people notice. So it's particularly challenging. You really have to get things right. And in the case of yourself doing your own work, you'll able to pick up what's wrong and that's what's not working with the piece, drawing your own face faster than drawing other people's faces. So it's something that I don't do enough of, and I really do want to start spending more time doing. I mean, the main problem is that there just is not enough time to learn all the things I want to learn. Because I could easily spend 100 years just locked in a room with a bunch of art books and art tools and just make and practice and study and try to grow. And I would be perfectly happy. And then be able to go, well, actually, it'd probably be better if I had 100 years to spend 1 year. Out of that 100 years, you end up spending 50 years drawing and 50 years living. But you get to do it where you go out and you spend a year having experiences out in the world. Then you get to come back and say, all right, now you get to spend a year making art based on what you've learned out in the real world, and then just go back and forth and repeat that process, because experiences in the outside world do definitely affect the art that we make, the way we see the world, the things that we're interested in. And to a certain degree, my obsession with art and making art has hindered me living a richer life. Like, I always find like those artists who maybe spent a year working on a fishing boat, or working for working in the Peace Corps, or just backpacking around the world, they have richer artwork, I think, because their artwork is informed by the experiences that they've had. And I, for myself, have not traveled as much as I'd like to. I've been to Paris, been to Italy a couple of times, I got to visit Tokyo. There was a point where I was trying to go to a new country every year. And just unfortunately, even before the pandemic, that slowed down a little bit. But, there's just, it's a whole wide world out there, and experiencing and interacting with it changes you, in my opinion, for the better. So I think what I'm probably going to do is, in order to make her face more distinct, before I was kind of like, oh, I'm going too slow in terms of putting the details, or I was worried that her details were going to be too harsh because I was drawing them with hard lines instead of soft lines. But now that I have the comparison of the shadows, I actually do think that the light will work better if I come in with hard lines to draw the light on her face. Not because that's how the light would actually fall, but because it will give me better contrast between all of the soft glow light that's going on in the shadows. Right here in the neck muscle, I actually need to switch to a soft eraser because I just put in too much. Like, there's just too much light in here, and I need to just pull some out. Whoop. Well, it would help if I was actually using the eraser tool instead of the brush tool. There we go. Erase soft brush. Maybe that'll pass you down a little bit. Or that's to the size. Yeah. Just need to bring this down a little bit. Let's see here. By the way, we're at a little over an hour here. So I got sort of lost in, which is good, getting lost in the painting here. But I'm gonna go through the last few comments. And we're not gonna end immediately because I'm actually at an interesting point. I don't want to stop right now. Maybe we'll go for another 15 minutes, but just so you know, we'll be winding things down here shortly. So if there are comments and questions, let's say that this is last call for that. And then we'll just sort of leisurely bring this in for a landing. Yeah, I think that the contrast of harder shapes on her face, even though her face is in dim light, being lit by reflected light. I think that will make her face pop a little bit more. Let me turn off the selection real quick. I may have to come in with a little bit of shadow to define these actual, like a little bit of the muscles underneath there, a little bit of dark. Basically, just taking what I have in there in terms of line art and painting in a little bit of shadow, like actual shadow on top. Maybe with like a really, really dark blue gray. Maybe I'll just make it gray. In fact, what I can probably do is just take the line art, convert it to gray, and then just slightly adjust it. It's already pretty gray. Who knows? Now it's just a matter of figuring out what I need in terms of finishing this piece, what needs to be painted on there. Let's see here. Back to the workout and diet stuff. Amar says, when I was younger, I ate more, worked out every day, but never gained weight. He said, once I learned weightlifters eat 6 to 8 times a day, I was done. He said, I knew I would never be able to eat that much every day. It's like, hell, eating 6 to 8 times a day would not be a problem for me. I have to force, I'm somebody who likes to snack all day, and it actually is hard for me to stick to just the 3 meals a day. In fact, I mean, I've tried cutting down to 2 meals a day, or doing the intermittent fasting where you just have 1 large meal a day. It's too hard for me, but I understand it, and I think that it does work. It's just hard for me to stick to. Amar mentions they have a International Self-Portrait Day every year on November 1st. Maybe I should start. Well, for me, it's more of I want to get into the habit of just doing it regularly. I mean, hell, I've been trying to get back to sketchbooking regularly, and I have a digital sketchbook on Procreate, and I just throw stuff in there. But just getting myself into the point where I'm just drawing all the time. In fact, when I'm done with the live stream, after I have a bite to eat, I really want to just work on drawings for my figure drawing class. That's something that I'm always trying to do. There's always stuff in figure drawing class that just didn't come out right. The anatomy's wrong, proportions are wrong, the pose is wonky. You know, just working on improving those things. Let's see here. Byron says, in all honesty, a large part of my enjoyment of making art is actually being able to entertain others. I like telling stories, giving people a bit of relief from daily life's troubles. You know what? That's a very good point. I mean, I often say for my own pieces that they're only 50% finished when I'm done painting them. The other half of the painting is what people bring to it when they see them, you know, how they react, how it makes them feel. So I definitely get that, and I share that sentiment. I'll tell you, one of the challenges of the airbrush tool is getting just the right amount. Because each time you make a pass, you're trying to like sort of smooth it out and get the feel that you want. And the challenge is that one stroke too many is all it takes to say, ah, damn it, I screwed that piece. And it's really, really hard to find that balance between what's actually going to make the piece work versus what's going to screw the piece. All right, let me switch back now to a hard-edged brush. And let's see what happens if I come in here and paint a little bit more solid light, solid edged light. Crank the opacity up a little bit. I think that this is going to be something where it requires more of a middle ground. So it's not necessarily, oh, wait, I got to turn that selection. I don't have to turn that selection on. But if I want to keep the tones within the silhouette of the figure, it'll just be easier if I have that selection on. And again, it's not like the piece has to be perfect in that degree. Yeah, having the hard edges where light meets shadow on the face, like I just put in here over the muzzle of the mouth, that's where I want the hard edges. Like as I'm going up now into the cheekbones, those I can have fade out into softer edges. But these hard edges right here are making the face feel like the face is more important now. Like when I zoom out on the figure, you get more of that sense of, oh wait, no, this is the even though her face is in shadow, I am communicating by those hard edges that this is what's important. You know, in terms of what we were talking about before about the time spent on a piece, the fact of the matter is that really I haven't had that much time over the past few weeks to work on this piece outside of the live stream. So while I've been working on this piece for months, if I work on this for, and I've been working on it for more than 2 months now, but it took me several months just to decide on which sketch I really liked and which one I wanted to go with. But if I've been working on this piece for, let's say, 2 months, if I'm not working on it outside of the live stream, that means really I'm only working on it for 2 months. That's 8 weekends. So it's only 8 hours to get to where I'm at now. And it probably has been more than that. But think about it. 8 hours to get this far on a piece, it's actually not bad. So it's more of the fact that, like I said, I'm not spending enough hours actually working on a piece. I'm not spending enough hours working on art so much like you guys, it feels like I've been working on this piece forever, because in terms of the number of weeks that you've seen me working on this piece, it's been a lot. But the actual hours are not as great as it seems. It seems like I should be farther along for as many months as I've been working on it. Whenever I start doing this kind of lighting and modeling, I feel like I'm doing a poor imitation of Thomas Blackshear. I haven't been able to find any art books of his. He's got lots of prints for sale on his site. But his work is so dope. If you guys don't know Thomas Blackshear, you should definitely check him out. His work is amazing. There's a lot of religious pieces. His work is some of the most beautiful illustration out there. Now, I have probably gone too bright with their facial features. And the real challenge here is how much of it do I want to smudge it down and how much of it do I want to erase down. And I haven't really even painted her lips in. And I'm trying to decide whether I want to go with green lipstick or magenta for both. I think I'm going to go for maybe like kind of a wine colored lipstick, like a dark Merlot. Oh, damn it. See, that's the thing. I don't use the smudge tool that much. So a lot of times I default and I think I'm using the smudge tool and I end up using the erase tool. So the goal here is the edges that are fading out, I'm smudging those, but the edges that are coming towards the light, I'm leaving those hard. And look at how bright I've made her cheekbones. The main thing I feel is that okay, I need to either turn the light down on those a little bit, or I need to brighten up her chin. And the actual real answer I'm thinking is I need to do both. I need to turn down the lights just slightly on her cheekbones while brightening up her chin. I am pretty happy with how this is coming out. I mean, that whole thing I was talking about in terms of satisfying myself, this is getting closer to satisfaction. Now, I look at this and I think, okay, now what I could do is put a little bit more of a warmer tone, moving a little bit more orangey yellow in the middle of the cheekbone kind of towards the light. But I have to remind myself that her her face is supposed to be in shadow and the light's breaking across her torso. So I don't want to push that too much. In fact, the more I look at this, the more I'm thinking, do I really want to brighten up that chin? I mean, worst case scenario, I've spent an hour doing this, and you guys might think this is nuts, but I could spend an hour doing this, get to the end of this live stream, decide that I didn't like any of this, and just this whole tone later, I'm like, delete, and just start over. It means I've lost an hour's worth of work, and I'm not going to delete it because for the most part, I'm happy with it. But the idea of not being that precious about it and just saying, if it's not working, dump it and start again. I mean, that's the reason why I've got these pieces that are taking forever and ever. But I am trying not to be overly precious. Or being willing to let go of something that's not working. That's probably the better phrasing. Now, let me take the eraser and very, very delicately lower the opacity and just sort of soften the light in the cheekbones. I'm not pressing very hard with the stylus. If anything, it's like I'm just gliding it over the surface. It's like I'm just pushing it back into shadow. I lightened it up. Now I'm darkening it down. But I've still got those slightly harder edges, which are helping, at least I believe so, helping to give the face a little bit more focus. And what's weird is even though I don't think I painted any purple into this shadow side, just by virtue of erasing the light, the orange, the brown just feels more purple now. It just feels cooler. And that's one of those tricks where, a gray color will feel, if you have an orange next to a gray, it's going to make the gray feel bluer or purpler, more cool. By the same token, if you put like a blue next to a gray, it's going to make the gray feel warmer. Just because that's how the cones and rods work in our eye. If you take a neutral color and put something on top of it, you're going to feel the opposite in contrast on that gray. I'm going to try and smudge some of this light back into this area just so her cheeks feel a little fuller. Because I don't necessarily want to lose the femininity of her face. I'm making it feel a little bit too hard. And if I just round the area below the cheeks a little bit, now she has strong cheekbones but soft features. Now, Ion Rocks, hang on. I'm going to take a screenshot of the chat because I don't know what Ion Rocks, you'd mentioned like somewhere in there, whenever I was talking, I must have said something about my wife. Ion Rocks says, your wife is right. Tell me what it is that she's right about, because every time I tell her she's right, she feels like it's a victory because I am so stubborn. And for as easygoing as I sound with you guys, like at least 3, 5 times a day, I say something and my wife just rolls her eyes like, and then usually I end up later to say, hey, that thing that I was being stubborn about, he was right. So remind me in the chat what she's right about. So I can tell her later. Let's see here. And Amar has been doodling with his non-dominant hand and upside down drawings with both hands. That is a dope skill. I wish I could do that. I mean, hell, that's pretty amazing. Do you ever do that on your on any of your live streams? The actual upside down drawing, or is that something where you need kind of quiet and concentration to do it? But that's pretty dope. Let's see here. See here. Negro Frazetta says, I'm tired of training and studying. I just draw for fun now. Dude, I hear you. I hope you're making some animations for fun. I know that you were super hyped about that. Let's see. And Mark is in the chat. Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a nice day. I'm doing great. And thank you for rolling in. Yeah, Mark is here. So he's back drawing with me. Let me scroll back down. A few comments to get caught up on. And Mark says the drawing is developing nicely. Thank you. I appreciate it. And Rock says your life is enriched by art. Ruwa says wonderbar. And Mark says you may have talked about this before. When I'm drawing a comic series, I'm drawing the same characters over and over again. I'd like to hear your approach to keeping interested in drawing the same characters over time. And Byron does give some feedback there. He mentions my advice would be to change up compositions and angles, drawing characters from unconventional angles, or just angles you aren't used to seeing can make a huge difference. And then Mark says, yes, different angles and poses keep me interested. I find the look of the character evolves. I learn more about how I like to draw them. And I also change their outfits over time. Some of them even morph into a different look. Well, I'll tell you right there, before I go into other comments that people have chimed in, while I do model sheets and I do a turnaround of characters before I start a series, I have a very, very hard time staying on model with my own character designs. I know it's nuts. They're my own characters, but I still have a hard time with it. And so for me, I don't get bored drawing the same character over and over again because the challenge of staying on model is enough for me. That's enough of a challenge that I'm trying to decide. This is one of those things where stuff like I may have all this other stuff and then I'll create an extra layer for lips because I may want to change her lip color. But I have such a hard time with keeping a character looking consistent. You know, I don't want a group. I just want that is the one thing that I find is a pain in the ass, is that it should just be pretty easy. Just drag a layer straight down and yeah, underneath the next one. But I get a lot of trying to do that and it constantly creating groups. So saying, because I find staying on model very challenging. For me, drawing the same character over and over again is enough of a mental, it's not that it's a pain in the ass and I'm like, oh God, this sucks. It's just like for me, for trying to figure out how to do anything better. Like the whole act of making art is an interesting challenge. The fact that it's difficult is what keeps me interested. Keeping a character looking somewhat consistent is difficult for me. And much like you said about your characters morphing over time, that absolutely happens with me. In fact, I mean, in Morningstar, I felt like I didn't even really learn how to draw Like half of the characters, it wasn't until the final issue where I'm like, oh, okay, now I know how to draw this character. I feel like I could do so much better in terms of drawing the characters by the end of the series. I so wish that I could draw them that well at the beginning of a series. So that for me, it's not so much that it's words of wisdom or ways to handle that problem. It's that the thing that you're talking about is something that I'm not good at. And I try to improve with every series and with every project I work on. But it's one of those, it's a work in progress for me as well, is what I'm saying. I wish I had something more profound to say about it. Um, I will say that, in my very first comic book I did, Eye of the Gods, I think I made her lips too dark now. Let's go up here. Let's try something like this. In my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods, I did not think that I was going to be able to keep my inks looking consistent. And I also knew, it was my very first comic. So I was learning as I was drawing. So what I did was I penciled it in order, page 1 to page, I think it's 140 odd pages of art, whatever the page count was. I penciled it in order from 0 to 140 or whatever. And then when I got to the end and started inking, I started with the last page and I inked the series backwards. And my thinking behind it was that my inking would be the worst at the end of the series. But my pencils had grown over the course of it. So having stronger pencils to ink over would really help me. Whereas as I got earlier and earlier into the series where the pencils were weaker, I would be a better inker and I could fix more problems. And to a degree, that is what happened. I still will definitely, I'll freely admit, I love that book. It was my first project. I stand behind it. I still sell it. But much as we've talked in this entire live stream and the entire course of the series of me working on stuff in front of people, it is always, you're always going to look back at projects and say, oh, I should have done this. I should have done that. This could have been better. The challenge is that I want to get her lips. I don't want them to look clownish, kind of like jokery lips. And I want her to look like she's not wearing a ton of lipstick. I don't want her to look like she's wearing a ton of makeup, but I don't want her to look like she's wearing no makeup. I'm trying to get lips that are slightly darker than unmade up lips. And there's also the fact that I'm painting on a layer that's below the layer that I have all those tones and lights on there. So yeah, in terms of, I'm trying to think of what I would say that, I mean, definitely the things Byron mentioned about drawing characters from different angles and keeping the composition interesting. I mean, for me, any figure that I'm drawing in any scenario is challenging. And that challenge of just drawing a figure and focusing on telling the story, the idea of what character it is, that alone, it's like I can't even imagine getting bored with it because it's so much of a challenge for me personally. I kind of like that. I think I'm going to come back in here and inside her inside the area here, the lower lip that's facing really away from the shadow. I'm gonna desaturate that a little bit more and make it a little darker. Just a tiny bit, not a lot. Well, I don't know. Maybe that level of saturation is good. I have to think about it. Let's see here. Ruwa says, do other things besides your main series. Let's see here. And Mark mentions, just like he said, yes, I started drawing someone else's story and found it refreshing to work on a different character. And he says she's telling you to go full-time art. Do commissions, build your skill, make some money at the same time. Words of encouragement. I think you can do it. You know what? That's a good point. It's, I mean, for me, a lot of my workflow is built around what's personally gratifying, because my day job is financing my comic creation as opposed to me just drawing to pay the bills and such. But I think that commissions and having that variety is good. For me, it's not necessarily that I don't crave variety. I do, but I think most of the stuff I have that I'm working on is so challenging. I mean, you can see when I'm working on the same piece month in, month out, and it's just a single illustration, obviously I don't get bored very easily. And I think that not getting bored is part of what allowed me to finish Morningstar, because, just finishing a comic book series, any comic series, is hard. So a little bit of graying down the lips. I have to decide whether I want to put some gloss on her upper lip. A little bit of light, wet lips sparkling in the darkness. Okay, now I'm really going to go through the last couple of comments here and wrap this live stream up, because otherwise I'll be here all day. Let's see here. Ruwa says, how many layers are you limited to on the iPad? Well, the layer limit is determined by the file size. And I think on this, let me see here, canvas information. So this canvas is 300 DPI and it's 16 by 20. And so at that size, the maximum number of layers I have is 14. So I have 2 layers left. If you want more layers, you just do a piece that, instead of being 16 by 20, if I were to change this to like 8.5 by 11, then I would probably have like 60 layers. If you're drawing something at like 72 DPI, you can have like 200 something layers. So it's just proportional. The larger the size, the fewer number of layers you have. I think that's just a matter of keeping it so that the iPad itself can continue to function even if you're working on a really, really big piece. Because I could do this piece at 600 DPI, but then I would have like 6 layers. And there's no way I could do this with the 6 layers. I mean, even as it is right now, I mentioned that I only have 2 layers left. And I am also, I mentioned that I have that glow that I'm going to add on top. Beyond that, if there's any special effects I have, this is pretty much going to kill all of the additional layers that I have. I've got 2 layers left I can add on. While we're at this, I'm just switching back to the black and white to check the values, and it does feel like they are working. Now the shadows that I had, the reflected light, that completely disappears. None of that is showing up in the values, and I do want it to show up. So I think what that means is, even though it's a shadow, I might need to come in with something that's just a little bit lighter. just so it'll show up. Like it's very, very faint. If I look in here, let me see here. Where's my tone layer? I turn that on and then off. It looks more like you can see. You probably can't even see the difference with you guys looking. I can see it on my screen here. But what happens when I turn it off? It just looks like there's texture on top of the body, as opposed to it actually looking like value. But what I want is just a little bit more reflected light showing up in the shadows, not to the extreme of what's on her face, but just a tinge. So I'm going to come back in and I'm going to tweak the values on these purples. Just bring the value up. It's like it's such a tiny tightrope. So we'll see about that. Let's see here. Byron says the nature of sequential art is that no matter how much you want to avoid it, you will always improve while making it. Can't think of many comics that look exactly the same from beginning to end. Yeah, that's it. You're always chasing. I mean, there are people like somebody like a John Romita Jr. or a John Byrne or Walt Simonson, people who have been doing it for so long that they're masters of storytelling. And with them, it's pretty consistent. But I think for a lot of other artists, if you've been doing it for less than a decade, then yeah, there's a lot of change from beginning to end of a series. I'd be interested to see what people who are like mid-career, who've been doing comics for a long time, but they aren't like old men, like somebody like Sean Murphy. I'd be interested to see what he thinks about his work in terms of how he feels at the beginning of a project versus the end of the project. Because his work definitely feels and looks consistent to me, but I'm curious how it feels like to somebody like him. Let's see here. Rua asks, how much are you going to sell this one for? Well, I need to look at it. I think that I'm trying to decide whether I'm going to have one print that's going to be 16 by 20 for $40, or whether I'm also going to make it 8.5 by 11 for $20. I may just keep it at the one size, the large one, but I've been thinking about going back and forth. Right now, my prints, I have them set where I've got a 8.5 by 11 for $20. Then there's a larger size, and then another larger size. So there's a $20, a $40, and a $60. What I'm thinking about doing is cutting out the super oversized one, just having the two prices, a big and a small. So I've got one that's a lower price point for people that either don't have a lot of wall space or just are on a tighter budget, and then having a larger one. So it'll probably be about $40 for the large one. 12 by 18, I think that's what the size I was going to go with, because I'm trying to also find, believe it or not, I have this whole chart of looking at sizes that common frame sizes that aren't expensive, that you can just pick up at any frame store, versus what are the sizes that a lot of artists that are doing fantasy and pop culture art, like what they're pricing their prints at, and at what sizes, to just kind of try and compare and decide what I want my pieces to be at. Because I think that my price points have shifted a bit over the years, and I want to have it consistent going forward. Every once in a while, like it's every decade or so, I come back and I look, I'm like, well, what are pieces selling at? Are people doing it with different materials? And, the fact that I'm using a print-on-demand service so that I am making less money per print, but I also don't have the infrastructure. I don't have the fact that every time an order comes in, I've got to roll them up, put them in a tube, take them to the store. So I also have to keep not just prints in stock at my home, but I also have to keep shipping supplies. Having a place that will fulfill it for me makes life a lot easier. So, and King's Little Fit, I see you there. He says put gloss on her lips. I'm going to put the gloss on their lips. Nigra Frazetta says, I remember when you said you were making a head drawing tutorial for Gumroad. Have you finished it yet? A lot of artists with less skill than you make a living selling tutorials. No, I have not made finished a head drawing tutorial. I need to do that. I actually have not worked on a tutorial at all because I've been so busy just taking figure drawing classes on my own and trying to improve my own skill set. I know you mentioned Modern Day James sells tutorials and makes money off his YouTube channel. He is amazing. I actually was watching one of his live streams the other day. There's one that has him, Ahmed Aldori, Adam Duff and Steven Zapata all together, just hanging out, drawing and talking, and just listening to those guys talk. That's as much. It's like you guys sitting here and listening to me while I'm talking. I very much was just like I had that on the background while I was just doing figure drawing, listening to them talking about the process, the craft, and life. Yeah, I probably should start making more tutorials. There are so many things I should be doing to make more money for my own art, and I'm not. There just aren't enough hours in the day. I need like a 40-hour day in like a 16-day work week. It'll be the only way to fit in everything and still get enough sleep and exercise. Yes, there's so many things I should be doing and I'm not, and it bums me out. But you can only do what you can do. Let's see here. But you make a good point, and I need to keep that in mind. He says you already have the foundation, make a few tutorials and ease your way into full-time over the span of a year. Yeah, I know. You're telling me things that I know and that I should be doing and I'm not doing. And I'm glad you keep bringing it up because it's going to eventually nudge me into action. See, King's Little Fit says, bring up the brightness. Not sure how it procreates at the moment. Let's see here. Interesting with pricing. Yeah, I mean, I honestly feel like the best way to start with pricing is to look at what a similar item is going for in the market that you're in terms of artists that are of similar skill set, similar career level, and just look at how they're pricing things, and then look at, well, how much is it going to cost you to sell the same thing? Because you may look at their pricing and it makes sense. I mean, their pricing may be what things are going for at the market, but you might not be able to afford to go out and get 100 copies or 500 copies of print made and keep that in stock and ship all those out. And if you can't afford it, then maybe you have to make your pricing higher than what the market can bear. And that's kind of tough because then you have to decide between making artwork and selling it at a loss to build a fan base. But it's also worthwhile to say, all right, I'm not going to sell as many pieces, but I'm not going to sell it at a loss. And then the people that buy in are going to be people that really, really do want to support you, even at an early stage. And I'm not telling you one is right and the other is wrong. I'm saying that those are decisions that you have to make for yourself, and that's true for every artist. All right, guys. We've been going for almost 2 hours here. It's a long-ass stream. But you know what? I was enjoying talking with you guys. I've been making, I feel like, some good progress on this piece. I'm pretty happy with it. So let us wrap things up here. And okay. So again, as I've mentioned, Art Book Study Group will be this week at Patreon. That's patreon.com/Jeremy, patreon.com/GERIMI. For as little as $2 a month, you can participate and get our twice monthly Art Book Study Group live streams. They are, believe it or not, even longer than this stream. And it's just us sitting down and studying with some of the best art books around. All of the old episodes are archived, so you guys can come back and watch. If you were to sign up now, you've got tons of videos, tons of live streams. You can go back and watch just here from the start before we get to this week's. But it'll be Wednesday, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And for patrons, there will be a link when I post the reminder for the live stream. And that link will just tell you, you can hit, just like with these live streams, you can hit the set reminder button to let you know when we go live. When we're on doing the live stream, I have a Discord voice channel open. So you guys can actually come in and hang out. Instead of being in the chat, you can actually talk if you want while I'm doing the live stream. So talk, ask questions, hang out, all of that. Patreon.com/Jeremy. It's patreon.com/GERIMI. And there'll be a link in the description for this video. If you'd like to get a free digital sketchbook, get notified when I've got new art prints, new artwork, new books for sale. Get little work in progress animated gifts, all that delivered right to your inbox once a month. You can sign up for my free monthly newsletter, newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my comics or read digitally on Comixology or Kindle, and I am looking at getting my books available on Ingram Sparks, that hopefully will be available from Barnes & Noble, other online book retailers. Hopefully I can get it on IndieBound, so you guys who want to buy from places other than Amazon will have some options. I need to get on it. I've got a window open to start doing it on my computer. It's time. That's what's stopping me from doing all of these things. Just having enough hours in the day to get all this stuff set up. But you can pick up books like my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods. It is a psychological thriller about a man cursed with visions he cannot control. Black and white, 140 odd pages, 144 pages. I'm an artist and writer. Everything that's in here from soup to nuts, I created. I lettered it, gray toned it, the whole shebang. My current, most recent project, Lucifer's Fall from Heaven, told as a Western. It is called Morning Star. There's 2 volumes. Volume 1 has issues 1 through 4. Volume 2 has the conclusion to the series, issues 5 through 8. Both of them have character sketches, character designs in there, script excerpts, page layouts, just breaking down all of my creative process in the book. And if you want to check these out, I have book flip-throughs on the homepage for my channel. You can go through and scroll down to the book flip-throughs and just check them out, see what's on inside the book. So again, thank you everyone for watching. Thank you for hanging out. As always, I appreciate the support, the great conversation, hanging out with everybody. I appreciate it. That's it for now. Go be creative.